Imagine being stopped by the police as you drive into the parking lot of your nursing home job as a nurse or a care staff one morning, and you're stopped by the police. They ask for your details, your name, your driver's license, and you are handcuffed and arrested and sent to jail, together with 17 other colleagues at your job. I mean, we hear of healthcare staff being arrested all the time, but 18 employees at a time. That's quite a lot. This is what happened at Colonial Heights Rehab and Nursing Center 2 weeks ago.
We have secured warrants on 18 individuals who are staff members at Colonial Heights Rehabilitation and Nursing Center.
What went wrong at this facility? Why were these employees arrested? Answers terrify you. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Struck Off, a series on this channel where we discuss things that health professionals did that nearly put them in trouble, or things that health professionals did that did put them in trouble, and we'll pick up a few lessons from their stories. So the arrest of these 18 employees at the Colonial Heights Rehab and Nursing Center came as a result of the death of a 74-year-old woman. So this woman was in the hospital, she was hospitalized, and she ultimately died from sepsis, and this was attributed to the inadequate care she received at the facility. So let me explain. So usually these nursing homes have elderly patients and dementia patients, or frail patients, or people with very serious chronic ailments. And bear in mind, in the nursing homes, for those of you who do not know, there are no doctors. I think the highest qualified person is a nurse. So usually when you're taking care of these people and then they get acutely sick or their illness becomes serious, usually you'd have to take them to the hospital. So this is what happened to this lady. She was sent to the hospital and she ultimately died due to the inadequate care that she received from the facility that she worked. So this lady was a 74-year-old lady, as I've already mentioned. She had diabetes and then she also had cerebral palsy. So this lady, when her illness became serious, she was transferred to the hospital, and the hospital, the staff that were looking at her, they were obviously shocked at the condition that she was in, and they were shocked to find out that she was in a nursing home in this entire time. Or they obviously make reports, and this is what led to the arrest of everybody that was in charge of her care at any point in time. So they said she was clearly kept in her urine and her feces for several days without any change. They said she had severe wounds, and these wounds were so bad and these wounds were necrotic that led to the sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. It was clearly pressure sores and treated that became necrosed. And with diabetic patients, for those of you who do not know, sometimes it can be quite a lot to manage their wounds. They have very poor wound healing ability. So if a diabetic patient gets pressure sores, it can become very, very serious. And I'm very sure this will happen in her case. So if you're a health professionals and then you are managing this patient and it becomes extremely bad and you send her to a hospital, obviously they're going to raise concerns about abuse and all of that. So these were the charges. So these 18 employees were charged with 7 counts of felony abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of misdemeanor abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult, and 2 counts of obstruction, and 27 counts of falsifying patients' records. So they said that there was a point in time where she had to be removed with a lift because obviously she could not immobilize, and they falsified the documents or records or notes that she had actually been moved with a lift, but it was never done, and the police were able to do the investigations and find out all of these things. So that's what led to the various counts of falsifying patients' records. Another thing is that this was not the very first time that this particular facility had been reported to the police. Some months prior to this whole incident happening, a social worker reported them as well. So they were already being investigated for different offenses. So what happened was, this social worker, she went there to see a patient of hers, right? And then she was attacked by a psychic patient, and the staff there did not intervene as they were supposed to. And so she also went to report, and they were already being investigated, and then all of these things happened. Now, what lessons can we learn from this? This is very appalling. 18 people. Just imagine driving to work one morning and then you're just arrested and sent to jail. 18 employees, that's quite a lot. And this 18 employees includes the director of the nursing home, some nurses, some care staff, so many people. What lessons can we learn from this? Do not accept a job where the staffing level is bad. In the police investigation, they realized that the staffing level was so bad, okay, so nurse to patient ratio was just appalling. And in such cases, these things are likely to happen. The residents or the patients will not be able to receive the adequate care that they need, and this can lead to issues like this. So if you realize that you as a carer or as a nurse, you're not able to provide, and this usually happens in the nursing homes, you're not able to provide the nursing care adequately urgently that you need to, because of the number of patients and the number of workers available, please make a complaint, and then make sure that whenever you're making a complaint, there's a trail or there's evidence. So instead of just going to the manager's office to talk, you should rather send an email, or you should write a letter or something, where in case of these issues, it will go to them that you did actually complain about these things. Remember that these situations can make you look like a bad person, maybe when genuinely there was just not enough staff to take care of this patient. Another thing is that when you're going to do a job, especially for private facilities, if you're going to apply for a job for healthcare staff, I think another thing to do is to check the reviews of the facility, especially in America. I think this is really very common in America. Check the reviews on the internet. This facility had just 1 star in terms of, they had very poor reviews online, so that means this has been going on. And then, so if you're going to work in such a place, you have to be very careful. Maybe the police is going to knock on your door very, very soon. So before you take up a job, especially the private sector, make sure you check the reviews. Another thing is that as health professionals, whenever you document something, unless you have not seen it, but whenever you see something and you document it, make sure that you are asking yourself, what can you do? Do not just document and leave it. What can you do to help the situation in any way possible? So for instance, this lady, the very first person that saw, let's say, the grade 1 pressure sore or the grade 2 pressure sore before it got to this stage, right? What did you do? Did you do a body map? Did you measure the size of it so that you know that it is improving or not? Did you refer to the tissue viability nurse? Do you have a care plan for the wound? Do you have where it shows the kind of dressings to use and how often it should be dressed? Have you reported to the manager? Are the family members aware? Did you take picture of when it was first seen and how it is now? Make sure that you are leaving a trail. See, the thing is, at health professionals, because of some of these issues that can make us easily look bad even without any fault of yours, make sure that you are intervening as much as you can when you see something or when you document something. So you saw it in, let's say, just before you closed your shifts, so there was not enough time, but you did put it in the note and you handed over to the incoming staff. When you handed over to the incoming staff, let's say the next few days you went on your annual leave for 2 weeks, you came back and you realized that nothing had been done about it. What did you do? I mean, you can easily look bad with these situations. Maybe it's not just your fault, but what did you actually do about it? Let me tell you 2 stories. And then another thing is that before you transfer somebody to the ambulance or the hospital, you have to be extremely careful. I heard of a story of a nurse whose resident was seriously ill and had to be transferred to the hospital. So they phoned 999 in the UK, and then the ambulance came for this patient. Later on, there was a report or a complaint that was filed by the paramedics that the patient or the resident was picked in a very bad state. They said the patient's pad was soaked and soiled, her clothes were stained, blah, blah, blah. But the good thing is the nurse that was taking, when they picked her, this was the complaint of the paramedics to the authorities when they picked her, after they picked her up from the nursing home. But the good thing is that the nurse had actually attempted to change this patient several times. This patient did not have a deprivation of liberty safeguard in place. This patient was deemed competent. So when somebody is deemed to have mental capacity and, ability to make decisions regarding their care, you can only encourage them, or you can only try to encourage them to change them. If they say no, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's what happened in this lady's case. She had actually attempted several times to change the patient or the resident, and the resident denied and refused. This was documented, and it was a day shift. The manager was around. She actually told the manager about it, that we've attempted to change it several times today. We've tried to reassure this patient. This patient had refused. So later, when they were reported to the authorities and then investigations were done, they were covered. They were fully covered, no issues at all. Imagine if this had not been documented. So as health professionals, that's another lesson. Always think that you're going to court tomorrow and your note is your evidence that your lawyer is going to use to defend you. She just did not write it. She went on ahead to phone the manager. So it's like you're leaving a trail so that if this person is called, they can defend you. If this person is called, you can defend you. There's another story as well. I was called to work in a nursing home urgently one day, and I went there, and then the carers there were telling me that the nurse that used to do the night shifts in that particular nursing home had been suspended. And I asked why, and this is what happened. So the night nurse, she phoned the ambulance to come for a patient who was, whose saturation was very, very bad. And out of panic and maybe anxiety, maybe instead of quickly setting up oxygen, she quickly went to phone paramedics, and the paramedics came quite quickly as well. So they forgot to, and when the paramedics came, somebody with a very poor start, let's say 85%, right? And the person is not on oxygen, there's oxygen in the nursing home. So obviously the paramedics will also make a complaint, they reported, and then she was suspended. So before you phone the police, before you send somebody to the hospital, make sure that you've done all your checks and make sure that they are genuine, and make sure that you have intervened. Whatever you found, you did intervene. Ask yourself, what can you do? The temperature was 39 to 9.5? Did you give PRN paracetamol? Did you tap a sponge? Did you inform the next of kin about it? Did you inform the out of hours GP or the person's GP about it? What exactly did you do before you just sent the person to the hospital? Remember, you are trained. Another person who was arrested in this case is the trainer, the nurse who's responsible for training the nurses in the nursing home. So remember that in the nursing home, trainings are quite popular. I mean, for healthcare professionals in this part of the world, trainings are quite popular. You're always doing moving and handling training, first aid training, fire. Like, there's so many trainings that you have to do. Some of these trainings, you actually have to do them like every 6 months. Some of them yearly. You do an online training, and then you do an in-person one as well. There are so many training. And the person who was supposed to train these nurses was also arrested because they say that you were not training them. And they realized that lots of these nurses that were employed in the nursing home, although they had not done their training, the management had falsified records that they had done the training. So they are just ticking boxes and saying that they had, done the training when they had not actually provided a training for the staff, which is also quite questionable. Another thing is that they realized that the management were employing nurses that had criminal records, nurses that otherwise could not have worked in other places because, they knew what they were doing. They were not, they just employed all of these nurses as well. So these are the situations. And the last lesson that I'll say is that early intervention is key. If you're in a nursing home, especially, this usually happens in a nursing home. If you're in a nursing home and then see that somebody is unwell, I always say that overreact than underreact. Even in the hospital, there are so many instances where I have phoned the medics or I have phoned for a drop in blood pressure. I'm sure they'll say that what's wrong with this nurse, the least thing she's calling us. But I feel like, let me rather intervene now than later. Imagine if I do it, assured I'm going to document that I bleeped you and then you did not intervene. If I do it the second time, you did not come, best assured I said I bleeped you, and I'll inform my in charge as well. Make sure that you are always intervening early. And then it's better for people to say that you are overreacting. I know that in the nursing home, there was this nurse, she's a Filipino nurse. Rest assured that if she works 4 days in a week, she's sending 2 people to the hospital. She doesn't like trouble. So the least thing, she's exaggerating it and you're going to the hospital. And I feel like in that way, she's covered. I mean, there is no way that she'll be sick on her shifts and then you deteriorate. She's sending you to the hospital. She doesn't want any issues. And I feel like that is way better than underestimating the person's illness and saying that, oh, it's just the weather, or maybe it's just this, and not intervening. You understand? I feel like that should be done. So basically, these are the lessons I have learned. Remember, early intervention is key. Check the reviews and the record of the private facility that you are going to work, and be careful before you accept a job from some of these nursing homes. If the staffing level is bad, you have to know, do not accept it. Just leave, and always leave a trail. Always leave a trail. Document as if you are going to court the next day. With regards to documenting and leaving a trail, let me give another story. There was a time that I had diarrhea at work, okay? It was a weekend shift in the nursing home. This time I was working in a nursing home. It was so bad. If you have diarrhea, you're not even supposed to go to work, but I was still working through it, right? And now it was so bad, it was unbearable. My tummy was hurting so bad. I remember I had to just put my head on the table and I was crying. So when I was crying in pain, at this point, I had been to the bathroom about 4 or 5 times already. In the middle of medication, I'm stopping to go and poo. It was terrible. The nurse who was in charge of the other department came to see me crying and said, oh, isn't that bad? Oh, go home. I'll take care of the rest. This was around 2. I had about 6 hours more to go. She said, oh, go home. Okay, just call the manager and go home. I phoned the manager several times and there was no answer. So I left. But one of the numbers I phoned went to the previous manager. I don't know if the number had not been changed. The previous manager, and this manager said, oh, sorry, this is a wrong number. I'm no longer the manager. Right. And then the other numbers I phoned, we had just gotten a new manager. This new manager's number had not been updated on the record. So I just left. Okay. I was phoned when I was at home recovering. That I didn't report to any manager and I just left God. And I had just started the job. I had just come from Ghana. So I didn't know all of these things. I'm like, what? I even phoned and the old manager picked up. People should call the old manager and find out whether she did not receive a call from somebody from this care home on this day. I phoned. They did not believe me. They said I just left the job. And this other nurse who was supposed to defend me also did not defend me that much. So I'm like, God. I told my mother about it and my mother was like, that happened to her as well. She went to see a patient of hers and then this patient said she should go. She doesn't want to see her face. right? And she kept calling the agency because it was an agency job. She kept calling the agency and they were not picking. So she left a voice note, right? And in the voice note, the woman was at the background salting her and saying she should leave, or she's calling the police, she should leave her house, she should leave her house. And this was somebody who was really sick. So my mommy left the voice note at that time that she's leaving, she doesn't feel safe, she has to go because this woman does not want her in her house, so she's leaving. And at the background, they could hear the woman shouting and all of that. And that's what saved her. Something did happen in the night to the woman. She did not die, but something did happen. And they were like, who was supposed to come and see her, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a lot of evidence protecting her. You understand? So she was like, I should have left a voicemail. Leave a voicemail. If you call somebody and they did not pick up, leave a voicemail. If you're calling somebody, you're calling a GP and then you leave a message to the receptionist, what is her name? Put it there. These are the lessons I've learned. What have you learned from this story and what do you think? 18 employees, all arrested. But let me also say that they've been granted a bail of £10,000. But however, the trainer and then the director, they have not been granted any bond. What do you really think about this story? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.